The morning sunlight filtered through the dense canopy of the tropical rainforest, casting golden rays onto a small wooden cabin nestled by the edge of a crystal-clear stream. The chirping of birds blended harmoniously with the gentle babbling of the water, creating a natural symphony that signaled the start of a new day. Inside the modest yet cozy cabin, John, an American biologist, was preparing for another day of work. John was a man in his mid-30s, with tousled brown hair and sharp blue eyes that always sparkled with curiosity and a passion for discovery. He had been living in this rainforest for nearly 2 years, dedicating his time to studying rare species of flora and fauna. To John, this rainforest was not just a workplace but a second home, a place where he felt a profound sense of freedom and connection to nature. But what made his life here truly special was the companionship of Max, his loyal Labrador retriever. Max was a large dog with a sleek golden coat and kind, intelligent brown eyes. He wasn't just a companion, but also a protector and confidant to John. The dog had been by his side through countless challenges in the forest, from torrential downpours to encounters with wild animals. Max was always there, a faithful shadow that never left John's side. That morning, John woke up early as usual. He stepped out of the wooden cabin and took a deep breath, savoring the fresh, invigorating air of the rainforest. The earthy scent of damp soil, the aroma of leaves, and the faint fragrance of wildflowers filled his senses, making him feel at peace. Max trotted beside him, wagging his tail happily as if he too was enjoying the beauty of the morning. "Good morning, Max," John said, crouching down to pat the dog's head. Max responded by licking his hand, his eyes gleaming with joy. John went back inside to prepare a simple breakfast of bread and a steaming cup of coffee. Max had his share too, a bowl of dry food that John had brought from the nearest town. After breakfast, John checked his backpack, making sure he had all the essentials for the day's survey: a notebook, a camera, a machete, and some water. Max stood by his side, watching his every move intently, as if he understood they were about to embark on another adventure. The tropical rainforest where John lived and worked was one of the most biodiverse places on Earth. Towering ancient trees with sprawling canopies formed a green roof that shielded the forest floor from the harsh sunlight. Beneath the trees lay a vibrant world: dense undergrowth, brightly colored flowers, and countless creatures ranging from tiny ants and butterflies to larger animals like monkeys, deer, and even jaguars. For John, every day in this forest was a new adventure, an opportunity to uncover the wonders of nature. John and Max usually began their day with a survey. They ventured deep into the forest where John documented the plants and animals he encountered. Max always took the lead, acting as a reliable guide. The dog's keen sense of smell often helped John spot hidden animals or traces left behind on the forest floor. "Look, Max!" John pointed toward a bush where a small bird with brilliant blue feathers was perched. He quickly pulled out his camera to capture the rare sight. Max stood still, not making a sound, as if he understood that John didn't want to scare the bird away. Life in the rainforest wasn't always peaceful. John had grown accustomed to the challenges the forest presented: sudden downpours, muddy trails, and encounters with dangerous animals. But he always felt reassured with Max by his side. The dog wasn't just a companion, but also a vigilant protector. Once, while John was surveying near a stream, Max suddenly barked loudly, signaling that something was wrong. Moments later, John spotted a venomous snake slithering through the underbrush nearby. Thanks to Max's alertness, he managed to avoid danger in time. At night, when the sunlight faded and the forest was enveloped in darkness, John and Max returned to their cabin. They often sat together, listening to the symphony of crickets and the distant howls of wild animals. To John, these sounds weren't frightening. Instead, they made him feel more connected to the wilderness. Max would lie at his feet, ears perked up, as if he too was listening to every little sound. "You know, Max," John said, stroking the dog's soft fur, "I don't think I could have lasted this long out here without you. You're the best friend I've ever had." Max lifted his head, looking at John with eyes full of affection, as if he understood every word. Life in the rainforest wasn't just about hard work. It was also about the tranquil moments when John and Max enjoyed the beauty of nature together. On some mornings, they sat by the stream, watching tiny fish dart through the clear water. On sunny afternoons, they strolled under the golden rays of sunlight, listening to the rustling leaves in the breeze. And on starry nights, they gazed up at the vast sky, marveling at the infinite wonders of the universe. John knew that this life wasn't for everyone. It required patience, courage, and an unwavering love for nature. But for him, it was the life he had always dreamed of. And with Max by his side, he felt he could overcome any challenge. At the end of a long day, John and Max returned to their cabin, where the warm glow of an oil lamp lit up the darkness. John sat at his desk, jotting down notes about the day's observations, while Max curled up at his feet, breathing softly. Outside, the forest was still alive with the sounds of the night, but inside the little cabin, everything was calm. John looked at Max and smiled. "Tomorrow's another day, Max. We'll keep exploring the wonders of this forest." Max wagged his tail gently, as if agreeing, and with that, they drifted off to sleep, ready for the new adventures that awaited them. That morning, sunlight filtered through the dense canopy of the tropical rainforest, casting golden rays onto the small wooden cabin where John and Max were starting their day. John sat at his desk, flipping through the pages of his notes from previous surveys. Max lay at his feet, ears perked up, as if listening to every faint sound from the forest outside. The atmosphere was peaceful, but an unexpected event was about to change the course of their day. The satellite phone rang, breaking the silence. John picked it up and the familiar voice of a colleague from a nearby research station came through, filled with excitement. "John, I've got some special news for you," the colleague said eagerly. "The plant we've been searching for, the one that blooms only once every few years, has just been spotted deep in the forest. A survey team saw it a few days ago, but they couldn't get close enough to take pictures. This is a rare opportunity. You can't miss it." John sat up straight, his eyes lighting up. He had heard about this plant for years, a mysterious flower that was said to bloom only under specific conditions and last for just a few days before withering. Capturing its image wouldn't just be a scientific achievement, but also a chance to better understand the unique ecosystem of the rainforest. "Thanks for letting me know," John said, his voice filled with determination. "I'll prepare right away and head out. Can you send me the coordinates?" After receiving the details, John hung up and turned to Max. "Did you hear that, Max? Today's going to be a special day. We've got an important mission." Max lifted his head, his brown eyes gleaming as if he understood the excitement in John's voice. John began preparing for the trip. He checked his backpack, making sure to pack all the necessary tools: a notebook, a camera, a machete, water, and some food. He also included a first aid kit, just in case of any emergencies. Max stood by his side, watching John's every move intently, his tail wagging slightly as if ready to set off. Before leaving, John reviewed the map and the coordinates his colleague had sent. The area where the flower had been spotted was deep in the forest, several hours' walk from his cabin. It was a place he had never ventured to before, known for its rugged terrain and the presence of many wild animals. But that didn't deter him. With Max by his side, he always felt confident. "Let's go, Max," John said, slinging the backpack over his shoulder. Max barked softly in response, then quickly trotted after him as they left the cabin. They began their journey into the forest. The path leading deeper into the tropical rainforest grew increasingly dense, with thick undergrowth and tangled vines. Sunlight became scarce, reduced to faint beams filtering through the thick canopy above. The sounds of chirping birds, buzzing insects, and rustling leaves created a lively soundtrack for their trek. John walked while observing his surroundings, jotting down notes about what he saw. He came across a few unusual plants he hadn't encountered before, but he didn't linger too long. His main goal today was the rare flower. Max walked ahead, his nose sniffing the air constantly as if searching for something. But John noticed that Max seemed different today. The dog wasn't bounding around playfully as he usually did. Instead, he appeared more alert. His ears were always perked up and he occasionally stopped to look around. "What's wrong, Max?" John asked, pausing to follow the dog's gaze. But he saw nothing except bushes and the dim shadows of the forest. Probably just a small animal, he thought to himself, then continued walking. Still, he couldn't shake a slight feeling of unease. The deeper they went into the forest, the more challenging the terrain became. They had to cross a small stream where slippery rocks made the crossing treacherous. Max leaped across the stream effortlessly, but John had to tread carefully to avoid falling. After crossing the stream, they moved through a muddy area where each step caused John's boots to sink into the ground. Along the way, Max kept stopping, sniffing the air and staring into the surrounding bushes. John began to feel uneasy. He knew Max was highly sensitive to his environment and could often detect danger from afar. But he didn't want fear to slow down their progress. "It's okay, Max," John said, trying to reassure both himself and the dog. "We'll be fine." After several hours of walking, they approached the area where the flower had been spotted. The atmosphere here felt different, unnervingly quiet. The chirping of birds and the buzzing of insects seemed to have vanished, leaving only the sound of John and Max's footsteps crunching on dry leaves. Max stopped abruptly, standing still like a statue, his eyes fixed on something ahead. The fur on the back of his neck stood up, a clear sign that he sensed something was wrong. John stopped too, his heart pounding. He followed Max's gaze but saw nothing beyond the dense foliage and the dim shadows of the forest. "Is there something out there, Max?" he whispered. Max didn't respond, only standing tense and ready, as if preparing for whatever might come. John decided to press on, but this time he moved more cautiously, his eyes scanning the surroundings. He knew the tropical rainforest wasn't just home to rare plants, but also the territory of dangerous animals like jaguars and venomous snakes. Still, he also knew he couldn't turn back now. The flower he was searching for would only bloom for a short time, and if he missed this chance, it could be years before he got another. "Let's go, Max," John said, his voice low but resolute. Max looked at him, then slowly followed, still on high alert. They continued deeper into the target area, unaware that danger was lurking somewhere in the shadows of the forest. But within John, a strange feeling began to grow, a mix of excitement and unease. He couldn't be sure what lay ahead, but he knew that today would be a day he would never forget. John and Max continued their journey deeper into the tropical rainforest, where sunlight was reduced to faint beams filtering through the dense canopy above. The air grew more humid, and the sounds of the forest seemed to change. The cheerful chirping of birds gradually gave way to deeper, more mysterious noises. The constant buzz of insects, the rustling of leaves in the wind, and occasionally strange sounds from animals hidden in the shadows. The terrain became increasingly treacherous. The narrow trails gradually disappeared, replaced by thick undergrowth and tangled vines blocking their path. John had to use his machete to cut through the branches and vines in his way, while Max led the way, sniffing the ground and staying alert. The Labrador wasn't just a loyal companion, but also a reliable guide, always vigilant to the surroundings. They crossed a small stream, where crystal-clear water flowed gently over moss-covered rocks. Max leaped across the stream effortlessly, but John had to tread carefully to avoid slipping. The slippery rocks beneath his boots forced him to grab onto nearby branches for balance. Once they made it across, John paused to rest, taking a sip of water from his bottle and giving Max some food. "You're doing great, Max," John said, patting the dog's head. Max wagged his tail, his eyes gleaming as if he understood the praise. But suddenly Max lifted his head, ears perked up, and began sniffing the air intently. The dog stood still, his body tense, staring at a nearby bush. "What is it, Max?" John asked, lowering his voice. He followed Max's gaze but saw nothing beyond the dense foliage. However, he knew Max wouldn't react like this without a reason. Max let out a low, short bark, a sound that seemed more like a warning. John felt his heart start to race. He crouched down, placing a hand on Max's back to calm him while trying to steady his own nerves. "It's okay, Max. Maybe it's just a small animal," he said, though he couldn't shake the unease creeping into his mind. John decided to continue the journey, but this time he moved more cautiously, his eyes scanning the surroundings. Max still led the way, but the dog no longer bounded ahead playfully. Instead, he moved slowly, his ears constantly twitching to pick up any sound. After a while, John noticed large footprints pressed into the damp soil. He crouched down to examine them and quickly realized they belonged to a jaguar, one of the most dangerous predators in the jungle. "Damn it," John muttered under his breath. He knew jaguars rarely attacked humans unless provoked, but the knowledge that one was nearby still made him uneasy. He glanced at Max, who was also sniffing the ground, clearly aware of the predator's presence. "It's okay, Max," John said, trying to keep his voice calm. "We're not here to bother it. Let's just keep moving." Max looked at him as if weighing his words, then resumed leading the way. They pressed on, venturing deeper into the jungle, where the terrain grew even more challenging. Thick undergrowth and tangled vines slowed their progress. John had to use his machete frequently to clear the path, while Max continued to sniff and check the trail ahead. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the air became, and the sounds of the forest shifted again. The cheerful bird calls had vanished, replaced by an eerie silence broken only by the crunch of John and Max's footsteps on the dry leaves. As they neared their target area, the weather suddenly changed. Dark clouds rolled in from the horizon, obscuring the sunlight. The wind picked up, carrying with it the damp scent of an approaching storm. John looked up at the sky through the canopy. "Looks like we're in for a heavy rain, Max," he said. Max glanced at him, his eyes seeming to acknowledge the warning. Within minutes, a torrential downpour began. Heavy raindrops pelted down, piercing through the canopy and soaking everything below. The path became slippery, and every step John took required extra caution to avoid falling. Max also struggled, but the dog pressed on, his strong legs helping him maintain balance on the muddy ground. The rain didn't just make the journey more difficult, it also heightened the danger. The small streams they had crossed earlier had now turned into rushing currents. John had to find large rocks to step on to avoid being swept away, while Max leaped across with ease. Even so, Max had to pause several times to assess the situation before moving forward. John felt his body growing tired. His clothes were drenched and every step felt heavier than the last. But he refused to stop. He knew the rare flower he was searching for would only bloom for a short time, and if he didn't reach it in time, the opportunity would be lost. "We're almost there, Max," John said, his voice filled with determination. Max turned to look at him, his eyes shining as if to encourage him. The dog continued to lead the way, undeterred by the heavy rain and treacherous terrain. Finally, after hours of trekking through harsh conditions, they approached the target area. The rain hadn't let up, but John could feel they were close to where the rare flower awaited. However, a lingering sense of unease remained in his heart. This jungle wasn't just home to extraordinary plants, but also the territory of dangerous animals, and he knew that in the shadows of the forest, anything could happen. "We need to be careful, Max," John said, his voice serious. Max nodded slightly as if he understood the warning, and so they pressed on, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The heavy rain showed no signs of stopping, and the tropical rainforest was now shrouded in a misty veil of water. John and Max continued their journey, even though the path ahead was becoming increasingly difficult. The rugged terrain, slippery rocks, and muddy ground turned every step into a challenge, but John refused to stop. He knew the rare flower he was searching for would only bloom for a short time, and he couldn't afford to miss this opportunity. "We're almost there, Max," John said, his voice barely audible over the sound of the rain. Max turned to look at him, his bright eyes seeming to encourage him. The dog continued to lead the way, carefully navigating the dangerous path. Even Max had to move more cautiously now, his paws carefully stepping on each rock to avoid slipping. When they reached an area with a steep slope, John realized they would have to climb over a small cliff to continue their journey. The cliff wasn't very high, but its surface was slick from the rain, and the moss-covered rocks made climbing even more dangerous. John stopped for a moment, studying the cliff, before turning to Max. "We have to get over this, Max," he said, his voice filled with determination. Max looked at him, then let out a small bark as if to agree. The dog jumped onto a lower rock nearby, waiting for John. John began climbing, his hands gripping tightly onto crevices and exposed tree roots. The rain continued to pour, making everything more slippery. He moved carefully, step by step, trying to maintain his balance. But as he neared the top, a rock beneath his foot suddenly gave way. Before he could react, John lost his footing and slipped. The fall wasn't very high, but it was enough to send John tumbling into a narrow ravine below. He felt a sharp pain in his leg as he hit the ground. Gritting his teeth, John tried to sit up, but a searing pain shot through his ankle, making him wince. He looked down and realized his leg was injured, possibly a sprain or worse, a fracture. "Damn it," John muttered, trying to stay calm. He attempted to stand, but the pain was too intense, and he collapsed back onto the ground. Leaning against the rocky wall of the ravine, he took a deep breath, trying to think of a way out of this situation. Max, who had jumped down into the ravine after him, ran to his side. The dog barked loudly, as if trying to call for help. Max grabbed onto John's jacket with his teeth, attempting to pull him out of the ravine, but the narrow space and John's weight made it impossible. "Calm down, Max," John said, his voice weak but soothing. He reached out to pet Max's head, feeling the worry in the dog's eyes. "You can't pull me out of here. We need another plan." John knew he couldn't get out of the ravine on his own. With his injured leg, moving was out of the question. He looked at Max, his loyal companion, and realized the dog was his only hope now. "Listen to me, Max," John said, his tone serious. "You have to go find someone to help me. Do you understand?" Max tilted his head, his brown eyes filled with hesitation. The dog didn't want to leave John, especially in such a dangerous situation. John straightened up as much as he could, placing a hand on Max's head. I'll be fine, but you have to go. Go find someone and bring them here. I trust you, Max. Max remained still, unwilling to move. He let out a small bark as if protesting. But John knew Max understood what he was saying. This dog wasn't just a companion. He was intelligent and had always known how to help in difficult situations. Go, Max, John said, his voice more urgent now. I need you. You're my only hope. Finally, Max seemed to understand. The dog looked at John one last time, his eyes full of worry, then turned and began to run. John watched Max's figure disappear into the dense forest, a mix of hope and anxiety filling his heart. He knew the jungle was far from safe, and Max would face many dangers on his way. But he also knew Max was brave and smart. If anyone could find help, it was Max. As Max vanished from sight, John leaned back against the rocky wall, trying to stay calm. The pain in his leg was relentless, but he knew panicking wouldn't help. He closed his eyes, listening to the sound of the rain and the forest around him, hoping Max would return soon with help. Meanwhile, Max began his journey. The dog ran through muddy trails, his strong legs carrying him over slippery ground. Max sniffed the air, trying to pick up the scent of humans. He knew this mission was important, and he couldn't let John down. Max pushed through thick undergrowth, his ears constantly perked up to listen for any sounds. He was aware that the jungle wasn't just home to harmless creatures, but also to dangerous predators. But Max didn't stop. He kept running, crossing streams and navigating difficult paths with only one goal in mind: to find someone to save his owner. Time passed slowly for John. He sat in the ravine, feeling the pain in his leg and the coldness of the rain, but he held on to a glimmer of hope. He believed Max would return, and when he did, John would be rescued. You can do it, Max, John whispered, as if speaking to himself. I trust you. And so, in the heart of the jungle, a man and his dog, though temporarily separated, remained connected by trust and hope. The heavy rain showed no signs of stopping, turning the tropical rainforest into a misty, water-soaked maze. Every path had become a small stream, and the ground was slippery and muddy, but Max didn't stop. The brave Labrador dashed through the rain, his strong legs pushing through the mud, his ears perked up to catch every sound around him. Max knew John needed help, and he couldn't let his owner down. Max retraced the familiar trails he and John had walked earlier, but now, everything had changed. The small streams they had easily crossed before had turned into rushing torrents, carrying mud and leaves downstream. Max stopped in front of a large stream, his brown eyes watching the roaring water. He knew crossing the stream wouldn't be easy, but he had no other choice. Max stepped back a few paces, then leapt onto a rock in the middle of the stream. The slippery surface almost caused him to lose his balance, but Max quickly steadied himself with his strong legs. He jumped to another rock, then another, until he finally made it across the rushing water. Standing on the other side, Max shook himself vigorously to rid his soaked fur of water, then continued running. The rain didn't just make the journey harder, it also concealed other dangers lurking in the forest. As Max ran through a dense thicket, he suddenly stopped, his ears standing straight up and his nose sniffing the air. In front of him, a venomous snake lay coiled on the path, its green body blending almost perfectly with the surrounding leaves. Its cold eyes stared at Max, and its tongue flicked out, as if warning him not to come closer. Max froze, his body tense. He knew one wrong move could provoke the snake into attacking, but he also knew he couldn't turn back. John was waiting for him. Slowly, Max backed up a little, his eyes never leaving the snake. Then, in a sudden burst of speed, he darted to the side, circling around the bush to avoid the dangerous creature. The snake didn't pursue him, and Max continued his journey, his heart racing but his determination unwavering. The rain kept pouring, and Max faced yet another challenge, a muddy swamp. The path ahead had turned into a large patch of mud, where every step threatened to sink him deeper. Max tried stepping into the mud, but he immediately felt his paws being pulled down. He backed out, his eyes scanning the area for another way through. He spotted a fallen tree lying across the swamp, forming a natural bridge. Without hesitation, Max jumped onto the tree trunk, carefully placing one paw in front of the other to maintain his balance. Finally, he made it across the swamp and continued running. Meanwhile, back in the ravine, John was trying to stay calm. The pain in his leg was almost unbearable, but he knew panicking would only make things worse. He tore a piece of his shirt and tied it tightly around his wound to stop the bleeding. Every movement sent sharp pain shooting through his leg, but John gritted his teeth and endured it. He leaned against the rocky wall, listening to the sound of the rain in the forest around him, hoping Max would return with help soon. "You can do it, Max," John whispered as if speaking to himself. "I trust you." Max kept running, despite the rain and the dangers along the way. He knew the researchers' camp wasn't far now. The scent of humans, smoke, and familiar objects became clearer in the air. Max quickened his pace, his strong legs pounding against the ground, mud splashing with every step. Finally, Max saw the faint glow of lights from the camp. He barked loudly, his voice cutting through the sound of the rain, a desperate call for help. A few people in the camp heard the barking and stepped outside to investigate. They saw Max, a drenched dog covered in mud, but with eyes full of urgency. "What's wrong, Max?" One of the researchers recognized the dog and crouched down to pet him. But Max didn't stop. He tugged at the person's jacket, trying to lead them. The others quickly realized something was wrong. "Something must have happened to John," one of them said. "We need to follow Max." Without hesitation, the researchers grabbed their gear and followed Max. The dog led the way, his legs never stopping despite the rain and his exhaustion. Max knew time was of the essence. John was waiting for them, and he couldn't let his owner down. Meanwhile, John remained in the ravine, trying to keep himself conscious. The pain in his leg and the cold rain sapped his strength, but he refused to give up. He closed his eyes, imagining Max running through the forest, overcoming every obstacle to find help. "You're the best dog, Max," John whispered, a faint smile appearing on his face. "I know you'll come back." And so, in the heart of the jungle, Max, a brave and loyal dog, continued his journey, overcoming every challenge to save his best friend. The rain continued to pour relentlessly over the tropical rainforest, but Max paid no attention to it. His fur was soaked, and mud clung to his legs, but his eyes shone with determination. He knew he was close, the research camp where John's colleagues were working. Max pushed forward, his strong legs pounding against the muddy ground, splashing water and dirt with every step. He couldn't stop, couldn't slow down. John was waiting for him. The lights from the camp gradually came into view through the rain. Max barked loudly, his voice cutting through the damp, quiet air of the forest. Inside the camp, a group of researchers was sheltering from the rain under a canopy, busy with their work. The sound of Max's barking made them look up, surprised. "There's a dog barking," one of them said, setting down his coffee and stepping outside. "It's Max, John's dog." Max ran straight into the camp, his brown eyes filled with urgency. He went directly to one of the men in the group, barking loudly and tugging at his jacket with his teeth. The man crouched down, petting Max, but the dog didn't stop. Max kept pulling at his jacket, trying to signal that something was wrong. "What's wrong, Max?" the man asked, his voice full of concern. "Where's John? Isn't he with you?" Max barked even louder, his eyes fixed on the man as if trying to say they needed to act quickly. A few others from the group came out, noticing Max's soaked and muddy appearance. "Something must have happened," a woman said, her face filled with worry. "Max wouldn't act like this unless there was a serious problem." At first, some of the group hesitated. They didn't fully understand what Max was trying to communicate and thought the dog might simply be lost. But as they saw the urgency in Max's eyes and his persistent barking, they began to realize this wasn't a normal situation. Max didn't stop barking, pulling at their clothes and running in circles as if urging them to hurry. "We can't ignore this," the first man said. "John might be in trouble. Max is trying to tell us something." "All right," another agreed. "We need to get our gear and follow Max. If John's in danger, we can't waste any time." The researchers quickly gathered their equipment, flashlights, ropes, a first aid kit, and other essential tools. Max stood waiting at the edge of the camp, his eyes never leaving them, as if counting every second. Once they were ready, Max immediately turned and began running, leading the way back to the ravine where John was trapped. "Follow Max!" the man shouted, and the group hurried after the dog. Max led the way with unwavering determination, despite the rain that continued to pour. The dog dashed through the muddy trails, his strong legs carrying him forward even though he was exhausted. The researchers followed closely behind, trying not to lose sight of Max in the thick rain. "This dog is incredible," one of them said, panting as they ran. "He knows exactly what he's doing." "Absolutely," the woman replied. "Max isn't just any dog. He understands that John needs help." Along the way, Max kept glancing back to make sure the group was still following him. He led them across rushing streams, muddy paths, and dense thickets. Each time they encountered an obstacle, Max would find a way through first, then wait for the group to catch up. "Careful! The ground is slippery!" one of them shouted as they crossed a stream. But Max had already leapt across, standing on the other side, his eyes urging them to move faster. Finally, after a long and grueling trek, Max brought them to the area near the ravine. He stopped, barking loudly, then ran to the edge of the ravine where John was trapped. The researchers quickly approached, shining their flashlights down into the ravine. There they saw John sitting against the rocky wall, his face pale from pain and exhaustion. "John!" one of them shouted. "Can you hear us?" John lifted his head, his eyes lighting up when he saw them. "I'm here," he called out, his voice weak but filled with hope. "Max! Max found you." "We're going to get you out of there," the man said, turning to the others. "Get the ropes and first aid kit. We need to move quickly before it gets dark." While the team began setting up their rescue operation, Max stood by the edge of the ravine, his eyes never leaving John. The dog wagged his tail slightly as if to reassure John that everything would be all right. John looked at Max, a faint smile appearing on his face. "You did it, Max," John whispered. "You saved me." Max let out a small bark, as if responding to John's praise. The dog knew his mission wasn't over yet, but he also knew things were finally moving in the right direction. With the help of the researchers, John would soon be safe. The rain continued to pour relentlessly over the tropical rainforest, each heavy drop falling through the dense canopy, blending with the sound of the wind whistling through the tall trees. In the thick downpour, the rescue team, guided by Max, finally reached the ravine where John was trapped. The beams of their flashlights swept across the wet rock walls, and they immediately spotted John sitting against a large boulder. His face was pale, his eyes weary, but they still shone with hope as he saw them. "John!" one of the rescuers shouted, his voice filled with concern. "Are you all right?" John lifted his head, trying to muster a faint smile. "I'm okay, but I can't get out of here on my own. Max found you." All eyes turned to Max, the dog standing right at the edge of the ravine, his brown eyes fixed on John. Max let out a small bark as if to confirm that this was the person they needed to save. One of the rescuers crouched down to pet Max, softly saying, "You're amazing, Max. Thanks to you, we got here in time." The rescue team quickly got to work. One of them secured a rope tightly to a large tree nearby, while others prepared the first aid kit. A man, seemingly the team leader, strapped on a harness and carefully descended into the ravine. Max stood close by, his eyes intently watching every move, as if he understood that everything they were doing was to save John. When the rescuer reached John, he quickly assessed his condition. "Your leg is pretty badly injured," the rescuer said, his voice filled with concern. "We'll stabilize it before we pull you up." John nodded, trying to stay calm. "Thank you. I don't know how much longer I could have held on if Max hadn't found you." The rescuer smiled as he worked. "You've got an incredible dog. He didn't stop until he brought us here." While the team worked to stabilize John's injury and prepare to lift him out, Max stayed at the edge of the ravine. The dog stood there, ears perked up, his eyes never leaving John for even a second. Every time John looked up, he saw Max standing there, a constant reminder that he wasn't alone. "You're amazing, Max," John whispered, his voice weak but full of emotion. "You saved me." Max wagged his tail slightly, as if responding to John's words. The dog didn't need praise. Knowing that John was safe was all that mattered. Getting John out of the ravine was no easy task. The heavy rain made the ground slippery, and the rope was constantly soaked, adding to the difficulty. But the rescue team didn't give up. They worked carefully, step by step, coordinating their efforts to ensure John's safety. "Be careful! Don't let the rope slip!" one of them shouted, as they began pulling John up. Max stood nearby, barking loudly as if to encourage them. Finally, after relentless effort, John was safely pulled up to solid ground. The team quickly shielded him from the rain and checked his injury again. "We need to get him back to the camp immediately," the team leader said. "This injury needs proper treatment, and he needs rest." As soon as John was placed on a makeshift stretcher, Max ran to his side. The dog licked John's hand gently, as if to reassure him that everything would be all right. John smiled weakly, reaching out to stroke Max, feeling the warmth and loyalty of his companion. "You're not leaving my side, are you?" John said, his voice faint but filled with affection. "Thank you, Max." Max let out a soft bark, his brown eyes full of comfort. The dog walked alongside the stretcher, never letting John out of his sight. The journey back to the camp was anything but easy. The rain continued to pour, turning the path into a muddy, slippery mess. The rescue team had to move slowly, carefully navigating the treacherous terrain to avoid any accidents. Max stayed close to John, his paws sinking into the mud with every step, but he never hesitated. Despite his exhaustion, Max refused to stop. He knew his mission wasn't over yet. "We're almost there," one of the rescuers said, his voice filled with hope. "Just a little further." Those words seemed to give the group renewed strength. They pressed on, despite the rain and their fatigue. Max continued to lead the way, his ears alert to every sound around them, ready to warn them of any danger. Finally, after a long and grueling journey, the rescue team reached the camp. The warm glow of the camp's lights shone through the rain, bringing a sense of safety and relief to everyone. They quickly brought John inside, laying him on a bed and beginning to treat his injury. Max sat beside John, his eyes never leaving him. The dog seemed to sense the relief in the air, knowing that John was finally safe. John looked at Max, his eyes filled with gratitude. "You saved me, Max," John said, his voice trembling. "I'll never forget this." Max wagged his tail, lowering his head as if to say it was simply what he had to do. To Max, John wasn't just his owner, he was family. The rain outside showed no signs of stopping, but inside the camp the atmosphere had grown warm and comforting. The rescue team sat together, looking at Max with admiration. One of them said, "This dog isn't just loyal, he's incredibly smart. Without Max, we might not have made it in time." "Absolutely," the team leader nodded. "Max is a true hero." John smiled, looking at Max curled up beside him. "He's not just a dog," he said. "He's family." And so, amidst the relentless rain, the story of Max's loyalty and perseverance became a living testament to friendship and unconditional love. In the heart of the tropical rainforest, Max, the brave and loyal dog, proved that sometimes a faithful heart can overcome any obstacle and danger to save the one they love. The rain had gradually subsided, leaving only the soft sound of water dripping from the leaves onto the damp ground. Inside the small wooden cabin nestled in the heart of the tropical rainforest, John lay resting on a simple bed, his body still aching from the ordeal he had endured. The faint light streaming through the window created a peaceful atmosphere, a stark contrast to the chaos and danger he had recently faced. Beside the bed, Max lay curled up, his brown eyes never leaving John for even a second. John shifted slightly, feeling a sharp pain in his injured leg. The wound had been carefully bandaged, but he knew it would take time to fully heal. He turned his head to look at Max, the loyal dog who had been by his side since they returned to the cabin. Despite the long and exhausting journey, Max had refused to leave him, as if afraid that something might happen if he wasn't there. "You're not planning to rest at all, are you, Max?" John said softly, his voice still weak. Max lifted his head, wagging his tail slightly in response. John smiled and reached out to stroke Max's soft fur. "You really are an amazing friend." Lying on the bed, John began to recall everything that had happened. From the moment he received the call about the rare flower to his decision to venture deep into the forest. He remembered the excitement of seeing the miraculous bloom for the first time, but he could never forget the terrifying moment when he slipped and fell into the ravine. The pain, the loneliness, and the fear of being trapped in the darkness of the forest still haunted him. But above all, what John couldn't forget was Max. The dog had unhesitatingly braved the forest, the rain, and the dangers to find help. Without Max, John knew he might not have survived. That thought filled him with a deep sense of gratitude. "You saved me, Max," John whispered, his gaze soft as he looked at the dog. "If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be here today." Max looked at him, his brown eyes filled with understanding. He didn't need thanks or rewards. For Max, protecting John was the most natural thing in the world. In the days that followed, John spent most of his time resting and recovering. He couldn't move much because of his injured leg, but thanks to the care of his colleagues and Max's constant companionship, he felt more at ease. Max stayed by his side from morning until night. When John sat in a chair to read or write about what had happened, Max lay at his feet, his ears always alert to any sound. When John slept, Max curled up beside the bed, ready to wake up at any moment if John needed him. One morning, as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the window, John sat up and looked at Max, who was curled up at the foot of the bed. A warm feeling spread through his chest. He had always loved Max, but after what had happened, that love had deepened in ways he couldn't describe. Max wasn't just a dog, he was a friend, a family member, and the one who had saved his life. John decided to write down his story, not just to remember it, but to share it with others as a testament to Max's loyalty and bravery. He opened his notebook, picked up a pen, and began to write. Line by line, he recounted the dangerous journey and Max's perseverance. As he wrote, John couldn't stop the emotions from welling up. He remembered Max's eyes when the dog found him in the ravine, the determination in Max's every step as he led the rescue team, and the comfort Max brought him during his darkest hours. "You're a hero, Max," John said, pausing his writing to look down at the dog. Max lifted his head, his eyes shining as if he understood John's words. John smiled, leaned down, and gently stroked Max's head. "I'll never forget what you did for me." As time passed, John's health gradually improved. He began to walk around the cabin with the help of a cane. Max was always by his side like a loyal guardian. Every step John took, Max was there, and that gave him a sense of security he had never felt before. One afternoon, as John sat on the porch looking out at the lush green forest in front of him, he felt his heart swell with gratitude. Grateful to be alive, grateful for his dedicated colleagues, and most of all, grateful for Max, the most loyal friend he had ever had. "You know, Max," John said, his eyes gazing into the distance toward the forest, "life wouldn't mean as much without you. You didn't just save my life, you taught me about love and loyalty." Max sat beside him, his ears perked up as if listening to every word John said. The dog couldn't speak, but his eyes said it all. To Max, John was his entire world, and he would always be by his side no matter what. The story of Max, the brave dog who saved John's life, quickly spread throughout the community of researchers, and even among the local villagers living near the rainforest. From the accounts of the rescue team, everyone was amazed by Max's loyalty and intelligence. He wasn't just a companion, but a true hero, a living testament to the special bond between humans and animals. At nearby research stations, Max's story became the most talked about topic. Scientists, who were usually focused solely on their work, now took time to discuss the extraordinary actions of the dog. Some even suggested that Max deserved a special award for his bravery. "This dog isn't just loyal, he's incredibly smart," one researcher said during a gathering. "Without Max, John might not have survived. We need to recognize this." It wasn't just the research community that was captivated by Max's story. Local villagers also began to hear about him. Tales of the dog spread through conversations, and Max quickly became a symbol of loyalty and courage. Some villagers even visited John's cabin to meet Max, bringing small gifts like dog treats or toys for him. One day, as John was sitting on the porch with Max, a stranger appeared. The man carried a camera and a notebook, introducing himself as a journalist from a major newspaper. "Hello, I'm David," he said, shaking John's hand. "I've heard about your story with Max. It's an incredible tale, and I'd like to write an article about the four-legged hero of the rainforest. Would you be willing to share your story?" John smiled and looked down at Max, who was lying at his feet. Of course, Max deserves to be known by everyone. The interview took place right at the wooden cabin. David asked many questions, from the details of John's fateful trip, how Max found the rescue team, to the special bond between John and Max. John recounted everything honestly, emphasizing that Max wasn't just a dog but his closest friend. "Max never left me," John said, his eyes filled with emotion. "Even when I was trapped in the ravine, he stayed there, tirelessly trying to find a way to save me. I owe Max my life." David also took time to photograph Max. The dog seemed to understand that he was the center of attention, but remained calm as always. When David raised his camera, Max lifted his head, his brown eyes shining in the sunlight, as if he knew he was being recognized for his actions. A few weeks later, the article about Max was published with the headline, "The Four-Legged Hero of the Rainforest." The story quickly captured the attention of readers, not only because of its emotional depth, but also because of the stunning photos of Max. In the article, David not only recounted the rescue mission, but also highlighted the special relationship between John and Max, a bond built on trust and love. The article brought unexpected fame to Max. People from all over sent letters and gifts to John and Max, expressing their admiration for the brave dog. Some animal welfare organizations even contacted John, offering to award Max a Medal of Honor. To show his gratitude to Max, John decided to organize a small party at the wooden cabin. He invited close friends, colleagues from the research team, and even some local villagers who had supported him and Max. The party wasn't just a celebration, but also an opportunity for everyone to share their joy and appreciation for Max. On the day of the party, the cabin was livelier than ever. Guests brought food, drinks, and even gifts for Max. Some brought dog biscuits, while others gifted Max new collars or toys. Max, though unaware of the full significance of the event, happily greeted everyone, wagging his tail constantly as if to thank them. During the party, John stood up, holding a glass of water, and said a few words. "Thank you all for coming today," he began, his voice filled with emotion. "I wanted to dedicate this party to Max, the most loyal and courageous friend I've ever had. If it weren't for Max, I wouldn't be standing here today. He didn't just save my life. He taught me about love and loyalty." The crowd erupted into applause, and Max, as if understanding that John was talking about him, lifted his head and let out a small bark. His bark made everyone laugh, and the atmosphere of the party became even warmer. The party lasted until late afternoon. As the guests began to leave, John sat back on the porch, watching Max rest after a long day. He felt his heart swell with happiness. Max wasn't just a dog. He was family, the friend who had changed John's life forever. "You know, Max," John said, gently stroking the dog's head, "you're not just my hero. You're the hero of this entire rainforest." Max lifted his head, his brown eyes shining with understanding. He didn't need titles or recognition. For Max, protecting John and staying by his side was the most important thing. And so, the story of Max, the four-legged hero of the rainforest, wasn't just a tale of loyalty and bravery, but also a reminder of the special bond between humans and animals. In the heart of the tropical rainforest, Max had become a symbol, a testament to unconditional love and the power of loyalty. Time passed, and John and Max's life gradually returned to its usual rhythm in the heart of the rainforest. But one thing had changed forever: their relationship. After everything they had been through, the bond between John and Max was no longer just that of a man and his dog. It was a deep connection, built on trust, sacrifice, and unconditional love. Every morning, the early sunlight filtered through the lush green canopy, casting shimmering rays onto the forest floor. John often woke up early, opened the door of his wooden cabin, and breathed in the fresh air of the forest. Max was always the first to greet him, with bright eyes and a wagging tail. The dog had become an inseparable part of John's life, always by his side in every moment. John had fully recovered from his accident, but he never forgot what Max had done for him. Every time he looked at Max, his heart filled with gratitude. He silently promised himself that he would always protect and care for Max, just as Max had protected him during his most dangerous moments. "You saved me, Max," John often said, stroking the dog's head. "Now it's my turn to take care of you." Max didn't need promises or reassurances. For him, just being by John's side was enough. But John knew that love wasn't just about receiving, it was also about giving. He began to spend more time caring for Max, from preparing delicious meals to playing with him in the forest. It was his way of showing his gratitude and love. The days passed peacefully. John and Max often went for walks in the forest, exploring new trails, listening to the bird song, and the gentle sound of streams flowing. Max always ran ahead, his ears perked up, his strong legs bounding over bushes and rocks. But no matter how far he ran, he always turned back to make sure John was right behind him. "You never let me out of your sight, do you?" John laughed, watching Max waiting for him up ahead. Max barked softly, as if to say he would always be there, never leaving. In the afternoons, when the sunset painted the forest in shades of red and gold, John and Max often sat on a large rock near a stream. John loved watching the sun slowly disappear behind the trees, while Max lay beside him, his brown eyes reflecting a sense of peace. These were the moments when John felt life was truly meaningful. He didn't need the noise of the city or the comforts of modern life. As long as he had Max in this forest, he felt complete. One evening, as they sat by the fire in the wooden cabin, John looked at Max curled up at his feet. He suddenly realized that Max wasn't just a dog. He was family, a friend who had stood by him through the toughest times. He remembered the early days when Max was just a puppy, with big round eyes and endless curiosity. Since then, they had shared countless memories, from adventurous expeditions in the forest to moments of danger. "You've grown so much, Max," John said, his voice warm. "But to me, you'll always be that little pup." Max lifted his head, looking at John with eyes full of understanding. He didn't need words to know how much John loved him. For Max, John was his entire world, the person he would do anything to protect. The next day, John decided to spend the entire day exploring a new area of the forest with Max. They walked along shaded trails, crossed small streams, and stopped at a wide, grassy clearing where the sunlight shone brightly. Max ran around, his strong legs leaving small paw prints on the ground. John sat on a rock, watching Max with a smile on his face. "You truly belong to this forest, Max," John said. "You're a part of its freedom and wild beauty." Max turned back, running to John and resting his head on his lap. It was his way of showing that no matter how vast and free the forest was, he would always choose to stay by John's side. As the sun began to set, painting the entire forest in hues of orange and gold, John and Max walked back home together. The trail led through the trees, where the last light of the day filtered through the leaves, creating a scene as beautiful as a painting. John walked slowly, his walking stick tapping lightly against the ground while Max walked beside him, his ears perked up, listening to every sound around them. "You know, Max," John said, breaking the silence, "I don't know what my life would be like without you. You're not just a dog, you're my friend, my family, the one who changed my life." Max lifted his head, his brown eyes shining with understanding. He didn't need words to know how much John loved him. For Max, just being by John's side was enough. The story ends with the image of John and Max walking together in the forest under the radiant sunset. They didn't need to say anything, for the bond between them had transcended words. It was an eternal friendship, a relationship built on trust, sacrifice, and unconditional love. In the heart of the tropical rainforest, amidst the lush green trees and the gentle light of the sun, John and Max had become a symbol of the friendship between humans and animals, a friendship that would never fade.